I recently had an epiphany on this subject. Brandon Aiyuk and coming back. 3 reasons. Brandon Aiyuk is 10th in the NFL in yards, despite being 33rd in the NFL in receptions. And I started thinking, what is that? And it occurred to me, it's, I think, like a basketball player, somebody who scores a lot of points without needing a lot of shots, who on a talented team is the most perfect type of teammate. So Brandon Aiyuk is Ray Allen, extremely efficient. Like Ray hits big plays, Ray hits threes, Brandon hits 19 yarders, and can play really well with other superstars, yet you wouldn't be great without him. 881 receiving yards. That's 10th in the NFL. 5 receiving touchdowns is top 15 in the NFL. It's pretty close to top 5. 7 touchdowns get you into the top 5. So he's scoring with the best, and he's producing with the best. The thing that really got me thinking yesterday about this was I was listening to Tim Kawakami and Matt Barrows on 49ers Plus Minus. I went on TK's relaunch podcast episode to interview him a few weeks ago, and you can go find that now. But this is what Matt Barrows, who covers the 49ers and is very tuned in with the 49ers, had to say about Brandon Aiyuk. This is reason number 1.
And a receiver who A, have the chemistry, but B, who can kind of see the Shanahan vision through. You just can't break that up. I mean, imagine if they let Aiyuk go. Who's the new Aiyuk?
Danny Gray.
It is Danny Gray. I mean, Danny Gray is the understudy. Danny Gray isn't on the field, and Danny Gray is still somewhere in his kind of rookie year as far as development. I don't think that anybody in the organization really believes in Danny Gray yet. Maybe he will. But my point is that it takes Shanahan so long to develop a receiver that there's no way he'd want to start that process.
First of all, respect to TK and Barrows, it ain't Danny Gray. I've watched a lot of Danny Gray in practice. He's not the next Brandon Aiyuk. Brandon Aiyuk was a more productive college player. Brandon Aiyuk was a better practice player. And Brandon Aiyuk was by far a better game player immediately in his career. So it ain't Danny Gray. But the thing listening to Barrows yesterday that really made it click for me was twofold. One, Barrows knows things. So let's start with that. And number 2, it really is great logic. If you find your quarterback's best friend, and that's what it looks like on the field, Aiyuk and Purdy have become. Purdy trusts him a ton. Brandon Aiyuk trusts Purdy a ton. If you find your young quarterback, your 23-year-old quarterback's favorite target, the last thing you let happen is lose his favorite target at a key developmental point of his career. So for that reason alone, the fact that you are all in on, you've been desperately trying to find a franchise quarterback as long as Kyle Shanahan's been here. You then stumble into one. You fall over backwards into a quarterback. He then develops a great relationship with a receiver, and you let the receiver go. Be insane. It'd be like having the luckiest thing you've ever had happen to you and then immediately do something to make yourself less lucky. And from a 49ers perspective, part of what makes Brandon Aiyuk so valuable is that he is so valuable to your young quarterback. It appears, I'm going to jump way ahead here. It appears like he's found his Julian Edelman, right? I mean, they're different types of players, but just in terms of Jules, Tom having complete trust in Edelman in a big spot, no matter what the defense was doing, no matter what else was happening on the field, he knew he could go to that guy. It looks like that they've developed that relationship. So that's number 1. You don't find your quarterback and then immediately take away his favorite toy. Number 2, he's getting better. He is good for Brock, and Brock is good for him. Let's get into some of the I'm going to make this big here, as big as I can, and let's get into some of the numbers. Brandon Aiyuk. What we're looking at here is yards per reception, okay? These are the NFL leaders I'm sorry. This is yards per route run. Yards per route run. NFL leaders in yards per route run, if I can talk. And what do we have here? We have Tyreek Hill, number 1 in the league, 4 yards per route run. Number 2, Brandon Aiyuk, 3.17 yards per route run. 4 is CeeDee Lamb. 5 is A.J. Brown. CeeDee at 2.74. So Brandon Aiyuk here stands alone at number 2, yards per route run. You might be thinking, is that good? I mean, I see this year it's only Tyreek Hill is better. Okay, well, let's keep going. Average depth of target, 3rd in the NFL. How deep is he targeted in the league on average? DeAndre Hopkins, number 1, 15.6. Mike Evans, 15.2. Brandon Aiyuk, 15.1. DK Metcalf, 14.9. So Brandon Aiyuk on average is targeted further down the field than one of the league's best deep threats, DK Metcalf. That seems significant. All right, let's keep going. Brandon Aiyuk, yards per reception, 3rd in the league behind DeAndre Hopkins and Mike Evans. You might be thinking, well, like, okay, DeAndre Hopkins leads the category. Is it that valuable of a category? But I'll direct your attention to a column, if you're watching this, that has reception percentage. I might have had this somewhere else. Let's see. No. So this is where I got it. All right. Should have circled it. Reception percentage, 71%. That's what Aiyuk's reception, but the percentage of the balls thrown his way that he catches or that he's targeted on, he catches, that is much higher than everybody else in the top 10 of average depth of target. So you might, like I said, you go 15 yards per reception. DeAndre Hopkins number 1. Man, does the category mean a lot? Well, DeAndre catches 57% of those balls. Aiyuk catches 71% of those balls. Nobody else in the top 10 of the yards per reception group catches over 70% of the targets. You got to go to 11. The other guy in the top 11 that catches over 70% of the targets is Devontae Smith, who catches 73% of the targets. So it's not just that he's targeted down the field. It's not just that he catches the balls for big gains, but he catches more of them for big gains than anybody else. But I started number 2 reason to keep Brandon Aiyuk by saying he's getting better. How much better? Well, let's look at his career numbers. All right. In the blue, reception percentage. It's the highest reception percentage of his career. 71% of the balls he's targeted on, he catches. Best of his career. Yards per reception, 19.6. By far the best of his career. 6 yards better than last year. 5 yards better than the year before, and 7 yards better than his rookie year. We don't stop. Just like Brandon Aiyuk. Average depth of target. We showed you those numbers earlier. By far the best of his career. 4 yards deeper on average is he targeted this year. And what about that first stat that I gave you, where he trails only Tyreek Hill in the NFL in yards per route run? He is blowing away his career best and his career average this year. 3+ yards per route run. Last year was his previous career high at 1.82. He's almost twice the yardage per route run than his career best of last year. He is having, first of all, he is a Pro Bowler. He's having a career year, and it's not an accident. Partly it's just because he keeps getting better, and partly it's because he's playing with Brock Purdy. He makes Brock better. Brock makes him better. See reason number 1. You don't break it up. Reason number 3, I promised 3. Here's number 3. You'll hear this, and it's true. He's your guy. You drafted him. You developed him. Okay, but I don't know, guys. He's expensive. Couldn't we just find another one of our guys? Well, maybe. I mean, the draft hit rate is 60% if you're lucky. So, yeah, you might be able to identify another receiver. I mean, the player. The other part of it is, does your guy exist in the draft when you need to draft another quarterback? Forget about, and Barrow's made a good point. Do you want to spend 4 more years, 3 more years developing the guy? Forget about that for a second. You guys familiar with receivers? It's not just that Brandon Aiyuk was their guy. It's that Brandon Aiyuk is their type of guy. Let me direct you to superstar receiver A.J. Brown, needing to be calmed down on the sideline earlier this year with his team leading and dominating the game, pounding the run. Jalen Hurts, the quarterback, goes, I can't deal with this. Nick Sirianni has to come over. Exhibit B, Stephon Diggs, very angry on the sidelines, throwing a tablet after a frustrating day. And I think that game was in London. Exhibit C, DK Metcalf, multiple occasions losing his cool on the field this year. Penalty against the Rams. Sean McVay wanted him thrown out of the game. Penalty against the Bengals. Got under his skin, not keeping his head. This is not championship level mentals. So I think there's so many reasons, but there's the three big ones. He is your quarterback's best friend, quote unquote. Don't break him up. He is playing better than ever, and it appears like he's getting better. And he's your type of championship mentality guy. That's not the kind of thing that you just let walk out the door. The question is, how badly will he want to walk out the door? I mean, fresh in all of our minds as we have this conversation is the fact that it definitely felt around the draft like trading him was on the table. It took a long time for the franchise tag, the way he was posting on social. It felt like he was under the impression that he should be holding his breath for the possibility the Niners do something dramatic. But I don't know if the saying "don't look a gift horse in the mouth" really applies here, but you spent 4 years developing. You fell backwards into a quarterback receiver partnership that has been exactly what you've been looking for. I mean, having a deep threat when you still, even though you throw it down the field more, you still don't quite cut it loose in the way some other teams do. And yet you're just more efficient. You're a more efficient home run hitting team. You're a more efficient 3-point shooting team. You got Ray Allen. Doesn't mean he's your best player, but you're not winning a championship without him, and he's going to do something that nobody else can do for you. He fits perfectly. And that's rare. So there's my pitch. There's my presentation. 3 reasons why Brandon Aiyuk must stay. All right, let's get to some of your comments. We need to draft some beef on the O-line. And this would be the argument immediately. I don't know if you intend to make this argument or not. Comment. We need to draft some beef on the O-line. I don't know if you intend to make this comment or not, but part of the way you get beef on the offensive line is by trading Brandon Aiyuk. John made this point, several weeks ago, but he's made it a few times. Like, you want to get up into the top 10 to draft a blue chip offensive lineman to protect this quarterback that you found? Well, one of the ways you do that is by trading an asset you have that, you don't have multiple Brandon Aiyuks, but you trade from an area of seeming strength. Michael, comment. I'm afraid to find out how the Niners will make it happen, but they will find a way to bring Aiyuk back. Product of having a good team is tough decisions. I mean, we've seen Chase Young be an immediate positive impact. Immediate. Well, is it between those two? I mean, we talked a few weeks ago about it being kind of the more premium position to find. You don't find guys that look like Chase Young in the 20s in the draft. You can find an Aiyuk in the 20s. You did in the late teens or the early 20s in the draft. Doesn't mean you will again. But, that would be conventional wisdom. But you go back to 2 things from Barrows, and the one being, and I think it's a great point by him. You put those guys together, it works so well. Do you mess with the mix that you got for your quarterback right there? Mahomes throwing to Aiyuk would make Aiyuk top 5 in production. Yeah. I think a lot of other teams would probably elevate his production because they would just throw him the ball more. They wouldn't have to spread it around. He'd immediately be by far and away their best receiver. What that looked like, it'd be scary because already in production yards, he's 10th. So while being 33rd in catches, it's just ridiculous. Comment from Finding the Foot. I think Lynch and Kyle can find future D linemen in future trades like Young for nothing, but they'll never get an elite receiver in a trade without giving up compensation. Keep him. Comment Jerome. The Niners are stretching the field now in ways they rarely did before or just flat out didn't. Brock pushes the ball unlike Jimmy, and I like Jimmy. It's a breath of fresh fucking air as a fan. Sometimes the F-bomb just works. Comment, DeAnthony. Here's how I see it. If the Niners win the Super Bowl, keep him for long term. If not, trade him and keep Young for the short term. I feel that's more vital to have a dominant pass rush to get to a Super Bowl. I don't know if you can make the necessary. We'll see this year. Can you make the necessary offensive plays, the explosive plays? Imagine for a second Brandon Aiyuk not on this team right now. Just imagine this team right now without. Obviously, they would try to replace, but we thought Traylon Burks was going to be Debo's replacement once upon a time. Imagine the team right now without Brandon Aiyuk. And imagine the team right now without Chase Young. Now, we've seen the team without Chase Young. They look like two different teams. There was one team that won 5 games. There was one team that lost 3 games. But imagine the team without Chase Young, and they're a slightly worse version of themselves. Imagine the team without Brandon Aiyuk right now. I don't even know is anybody catching the ball over the top at all? Is anybody catching the ball? I mean, I'm having many nightmares in my brain imagining what this offense looks like without Brandon Aiyuk right now. What Barrow said yesterday, I thought, or whenever he said it, I listened to it yesterday, but on the most recent show, I thought was very clarifying. Zach, short answer, because he's wide receiver 1 now. You know how most things in life aren't black and white, but are murky shades of gray? Yeah, this is not one of those cases. That's all one needs to say. Most things are gray, but require black and white answers. That's the complication of life. I always reference it. I think it's great. I haven't said it in a while, so I'll say it for people who haven't heard it. Ethan Sherwood Strauss's book on the Warriors, which I read, I don't know when it came out, but there's a great quote in there from Bruce Frazier, the assistant coach, and he's talking about players who can play in the gray. Like what you're looking for is guys like Draymond, they play in the gray. I think he might have been talking about some international players and American player. I don't remember exactly the context of it, but he was talking about playing in the gray. I thought was a great quote. Like that's what you're looking for in life. That's what you're looking for. But the complication with salary caps and contracts is that yes, things happen in the gray, but eventually they happen in black and white. You have to if you are doing one thing, you are not doing something else. If you are working late, you are not at home with your family. It's gray. I mean, it could be gray, but it's actually, black and white. It's it's both, which I guess makes it gray. But there's only one of each person. You can just be in one place at one time. Without Big Des says without Aiyuk, it would be Screen City. Gammon comment. Lots of high production receivers have been taken in the second round. Keep Chase. Top defensive ends aren't in the second round. Platoon the receiver opposite of Debo. Scheme team. I think that Brock Purdy is showing that you've got to go beyond the. Well, I think the moment that Niners lost that Super Bowl to Patrick Mahomes, it was clear you got to go beyond the scheme. You need somebody who can go beyond the scheme for you. And Brock Purdy is showing what it looks like when you can go beyond Kyle's scheme a little bit. And I think the same is true for receivers. I mean, they've drafted receivers. They drafted Dante Pettis. It was a disaster. It was a little more of a, lottery type draft on Danny Gray. You don't draft Danny Gray in the 3rd round expecting him to be the next Brandon Aiyuk, and he's not. But he's also not the next Kendrick Bourne, it turns out. Jennings nailed that pick. He wasn't a 2nd or 3rd rounder. I mean, that was more crapshoot. That was a 7th rounder. That was more crapshoot than genius. So, you might get the next guy. You might not. You might get somebody talented who doesn't fit in. There's so many things beyond your control. they had such an inside track on Aiyuk because it was a really deep receiver draft. A lot of receivers went ahead of him. Herm Edwards was Brandon Ayuk's coach and knows John Lynch really well. And they got an excellent scouting report on the guy. It was and is pretty unique. And I think that it's not, I don't want to say they got lucky, but I think when you nail a pick like that, sometimes you got to be careful not to overvalue how good you are at identifying it, because you could easily miss the next pick like that. You can't operate out of that fear, but they did this once already. They traded their type of guy who was elite at a premium position, thinking, okay, we'll get 80 cents on the dollar. It's actually, part of how they got this guy, but we'll get 80 cents on the dollar, and we'll draft Javon Kinlaw. Didn't work. Now they got this guy, so you could argue, well, do it again, trade Aiyuk, draft a receiver and an offensive lineman somehow, and one of those guys will hit. Maybe one of those guys will hit. So I view the Buckner thing as gray area. It got you up to Aiyuk, but you didn't replace Buckner. So you just plugged one hole and opened up another. Do you use Aiyuk to plug your offensive line hole, to draft offensive line and receiver? I mean, that would be the thinking. You use Aiyuk to get a more premium offensive lineman. Maybe somehow you get a receiver out of it too. But if you hadn't just found Brock Purdy, then I'd be much more inclined to entertain that idea. You just found the guy's best friend. Now, if I were going to make a devil's advocate argument, I'd say, well, if Brock is everything you think he's going to be, then he can elevate another receiver too. Maybe. I thought Barrow's tone of like, you don't do this, given his connection to the how informed he is around the organization, was pretty telling, though. Comment from Kupaliski. Aiyuk is an elite route runner. He's an elite blocker. He has elite hands. He took the time to invest in his development. You can't just let him walk. What's he going to want to get paid? Of course, is the 20, 25. What happens if you take Chase Young over him? Well, you think your defensive line continues to be elite, but you drafted Drake Jackson for that reason. So if it was that easy to just find guys and plug them in, Drake Jackson would just be your guy, and you would not worry about another Brandon Aiyuk. But it's not that easy. I think you got to find, the Aiyuk path would be you spend your prioritize in the offseason your Amenahu's, that type of guy that just elevates the other pass rush a little bit. You have to bite the bullet sometimes. KC trades Hill and won the chip after improving their O-line. Trenches are your most important position's best friend. I mean, it's not like they haven't invested in. Well, they haven't. Not on the offensive line. That's what makes it painful. And that's where you start wondering, they wouldn't trade Debo, would they? So, we'll see. All right. That's that. Yeah, that's that for this. Go ahead and hit that like button. Appreciate that. If you're here right now, just hit the like button. You do a great service when you do that. The YouTube algorithm loves it, and it makes more people see it. And then more people see it, more people subscribe to the channel, and then monetization sensation, it grows. So you help out. You are. It's a tip. Tips are welcome. All right. Thanks for your time, everybody. Hit that like button. Subscribe to the channel. Send this video to somebody else you love or somebody else you hate, and tell them, check it out. This dude's a genius. Later, everybody.